Game changer, and call the July 22nd meeting of the Norfolk Public School Building Committee to order. We don't have minutes for last meeting yet, so we'll do that in the next meeting. So we can jump right into the number one and only agenda item, which is the updates that we discussed at the end of last meeting. Justin, you want to take it away?
Absolutely. So good evening, everyone. Justin Tebow with AI3. What's in front of you on the large piece of paper is the exact same thing that is on the smaller version and was sent out in the meeting packet. It's just minus the agenda slide. So what we did is we went through and we updated the costs based upon the conversations at the last meeting. On the slide here with all of the columns, this was really the breakdown of all the different options. And the adjustments that were made are taking the additional capital improvement items, so the new chiller, the fire alarm, the playground, refresh, everything, all of those items down here, and we took those out of the cost of the actual project, so they're below the line items. So the cost obviously went down because those items are now outboard of it. One thing to note about those additional capital improvement items, markups, percentages, soft costs, etc., have been applied to these prices. So if these were to be added back in, it's a direct add to the total project budget. For instance, the mechanical system chiller of $550,000, that would be the added cost, not an additional percentage on top of that number there. So the math is already done, should be pretty straightforward to just pick and choose and go accordingly from there. Additionally, we took a look at one of the hard bids that we received for another project for modulars. It was about a year or so old. It was a project that was slightly larger, about 45,000 square feet instead of 36,000 square feet. And extrapolating from that size difference, as well as the escalation, it was about a year or so ago, those bids, actual hard bids, came in line with what is being shown here. Again, just as a double check and a reference for validation of these numbers here. So wanted to provide that little blip of information. And then if you flip over the packet, the sheet. Similarly to last time, we have all the breakdowns for the different options. These are the updated numbers, pulling out those capital improvement options. And then we've also provided that level A, level B finish for the modulars. You can again see the deduct of what the less durable finishes would be for all the level B items for the options for 1, 2, and 3 for all the modulars. That was the update for the cost information that we made since last meeting. Open it up, questions, comments, thoughts?
I think at the last meeting, in looking at the comparison prices, just because Justin wasn't able to be with us, we looked at the difference between the hard builds and all of the modulars, first from a longevity standpoint, and I think you said the brick and mortar project has an expected life expectancy of 50 years, whereas the modulars level B finish is about 20 or 25, is that correct, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, somewhere around there. Again, it depends on maintenance and upkeep, but it's half of what the permanent option is.
Right. And we had asked a little bit about what are some of the primary things that drive the cost of the modulars, because people expect them to be significantly less, and I know you reviewed it, but maybe you could just capture some of that again. Yeah,
so some of the items that are really increasing the cost of these modulars are anything that, if you think about it, almost like a Lego block. The modular is 14 feet, excuse me, 14 feet wide by 45 or 66 feet long. And if you have any modification to that, it starts increasing cost. So in other words, if you stack 3 of them in a row to make a classroom, you got to start taking out walls. That impacts cost. Or if you have one unit and you're subdividing into offices, you're adding walls. That increases cost. So it's not like a construction trailer where it's the exact same shape just over and over again. There is some variability within it to get your classroom sizes what you need to create offices. You're not going to put an office in one full unit, and you can't fit a classroom in one full unit either. Additionally, all the plumbing fixtures that are required for the youngest level, there's a restroom required for every classroom. So plumbing increased the cost as well as all the exhaust and all the ventilation requirements needed for those additional plumbing fixtures and restroom facilities. So, some of the items, but that's the gist of why it lands where it does.
And I think as a committee, as we looked at these options, the only one that we felt was truly aligned or would provide the same sort of educational service was modular option A. In both modular option 2 and 3, there were significant concerns around the students traveling back and forth and lost learning time. The committee asked me to think about what some of the educational impacts would be. And I am going to meet with the police and fire. I just haven't had a chance to do. They're also a little busy right now. But some of the things that we talked about in both modular option 2 and 3, those units would be the preschool, early childhood plus 1 grade level. That grade level would lose approximately probably 20 minutes of learning time because they would have to get dressed in winter clothes, travel to lunch, travel back, and then also they have one special a day. Even if you back them back to back, they're going to lose travel time on each end. So there's lost learning time. The other challenge that we would face is that from a safety and security standpoint, and I was going to ask you about this, Justin, I didn't get to, but these are standalone units. So it is a third building that would have to be, or a second building on this site that would have to be secured and locked down if there was ever an emergency. The main system, the intercom system within the existing would not be connected to a modular unit. Is that correct, or is there a way to connect the?
We would have to look into that. There may be a way to connect it in.
Okay, so but that would drive additional cost to
Yes.
have a PA system installed
Yes.
that would connect to this. So I do want to talk with police and fire further about the challenges of locking down a separate building. And we'd obviously have to update our emergency plans. But the other thing is, all of the Freeman main entrances are reinforced glass. We have double containment areas. Those are security upgrades that were put in, voted on by the school committee that have been made over the last few years. I don't know what glass you would have or security at the foyer of these buildings, but my guess is if we were going to reinforce with 3mm film, which we have in some of ours, or put in a second containment area with an additional buzz, that's going to create additional cost as well.
The modification in glass definitely will increase the cost of the modulars. As per code, we need to provide a vestibule based upon climate for any of the main entries, so that wall system is already there, but we would need to provide some additional mechanisms for electronic locking to create that containment zone within it. So there would be some additional costs if you wanted to replicate the safety provisions that you currently have in the modular units as well.
And the other thing that I think is not included in this estimate that we would have to put in that would also drive costs is security cameras throughout the modular units, which we have multiple within our existing that are connected to the police so that they can see into all of our buildings if they ever have to respond. So that isn't in the base price, but would have to be included. So
is that baked into the permanent building as well already, or
it is. We have security cameras throughout the perimeter.
No, sorry, I'm saying in this estimate, or are those add-on items that we should include in that as well?
In the building addition?
Yep. The building addition
Permanent?
and renovation, the permanent stick-built version, does have cameras included. It does have all the electronic door hardware required based upon the egress components. There is no delayed entry glazing because there is no entrance over there.
Gotcha.
But that could be something, actually, no, there is the pre-K entrance over there, so that would have to be added. The delayed entry glass would have to be added for the pre-K component.
Yeah.
But that would be the only component needing to be added.
Yeah. And it would connect with the intercom system because
Yes.
it's a single unit.
Right.
So
Intercom systems, this is probably silly, but they have to be hardwired. They're not.
the one that we have is.
There's a couple different versions that you can do if you're using it for mass notification, basically more than just so-and-so come to the office,
Yeah.
more so like there's an event,
Yep.
shelter in place, etc. It should be hardwired.
Okay.
So.
And the one that we have also has settings where when you make the announcement, it can lock or close automatically doors to the wings.
So it's not just like an intercom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not Alexa.
Well, I know, I'm
Yeah.
like, everything's wireless now, I'm not,
Yeah.
but that makes sense.
And that 20 minutes a day lost learning time, I'm assuming that's just the baseline lost learning time. That doesn't.
That's if we the kids go to lunch and specials directly, so they're losing 10 minutes coming out and 10 minutes going back. The other educational impacts that aren't cost necessarily related, but having one grade, we do have some specialized programs, special education programs that are multi-age. So while we've put some special ed classrooms in here, students that access our therapeutic programs, our program for students with autism or developmental delays, those are multi-age classrooms located in the main building. So that would separate certain students from their grade level colleagues, which has a civil rights impact. So that would have to be considered as well as what we talked about before, if you have a child that's sick that needs to go to the nurse is not in these buildings. So they would have to be escorted by a staff member into the building. In an emergency situation, if a child had a seizure, the nurse would have to be walkie-talkied and would have to exit the building to traverse to these spots. Or we would have to add an office for a nurse and hire a second nurse, which also has staffing impact. So those are just some of the immediate, as well as we talked about our literacy and math coaches. There are specialists that deliver services to students in multiple classrooms. So we would have to add travel time if we are going to have a math coach go out to work in one of the modulars not connected. So from a staffing perspective, people will be going, I have a group in this classroom, my next group's over, I have to get my stuff and walk over. So we'd have to build in some time, which would lose some instructional time of some of our core staff as well. So for those reasons, we had thought modular option 1 was the most viable. But again, without security cameras, without you'd only be reinforcing the glass in the same location in modular option 1, but we would have to add security cameras, we would have to add an intercom system to that base price. It's going to come up from the current estimate of 34.9. It has a 25-year life expectancy, and we'd be looking at maybe a $2 million difference for a 50-year building.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's other thoughts or comments or questions. And again, I will talk with the police about security, but I just haven't had a chance to structure that, and thought it was worth discussing further here whether that adds value to the conversation.
And I agree. I mean, the amount of savings for, maybe $2 million versus, having a stick built that matches the rest of the building is a little bit more comfortable, a little more spacious, doesn't feel as cramped. And the fact that it's a 50-year building, pretty much.
We also talked at the last meeting, if it's a 25-year building and in 25 years you're building another addition, there's going to be significant cost inflation in addressing a project at that time too, which will probably offset whatever you might have saved by.
Well, and you'll have to remove the building, which
Yes.
will,
Yeah.
to build on top, so that will also.
Right.
Is it, would the town finance individual be able to graph that out? So that way when we go to bring this to the townspeople, show them,
Yep.
sure, you might save a little bit on the short term, but here's what that payment, a lot of people say, well, I don't care, I'm not going to be here in 25 years, but just for the, for the long-term good of the town, just showing how this will impact people versus, if we go with, I think a lot of us are kind of looking at this being like, I think the stick one makes sense, it lasts longer, all that stuff, and showing maybe you spend a little bit more now, but in the long run, it should save significantly, which is what I'm picking up from this, unless I'm misunderstanding.
What we found helpful in the past with all the public projects that we do is it is hard to grasp these numbers. They seem intangible, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, it's a large number, and it doesn't become real. So what we would recommend doing in a situation like this is go to the town finance department and say, okay, what would the average taxpayer impact be for this number, this number, this number, and this number over the course of whatever the bond would be?
Well, yeah, that's what they
20,
did for
25, 30, and there's multiple ways of doing it.
what's the
Fire station.
the skill school that they're redoing.
VOTEC, yes.
VOTEC.
Yeah.
They broke it out and they basically said for every whatever it is, $10,000 in value for your home or whatever, they broke it down so that way you could kind of do the quick math on
Yeah.
what your existing taxes are and be like, okay, that's going to be $200 or, you know, $1,000.
Exactly. And one thing that is helpful in this situation is you'll see, okay, if you go from a stick-built version to option 1 or 2 or 3, that difference per year is, you can fill in the blank, a cup of coffee a month or a pizza a month or whatever that variable is, because you spread this over the town's population. And
then
at the end of the
over 20
day, it makes it more tangible and graspable as far as what the actual financial impact is.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I think too, I know we don't have to present them a choice like we talked about last week, which I finally figured out. Even if you just broke it down, like exactly like Michael said, like this one would be X amount per $1,000 assessed, and this one would be, you know, X plus $5 per $1,000 assessed.
right.
So we could, I think a really good next step would be to do a cost analysis. What I want to check with the committee is, are we doing a cost analysis of all 3, or are we sticking with the building addition and modular 1?
I think we should select which one we're going to recommend to the town, and that way the finance individual only has to do their job once. And then obviously, you know, if we could maybe do the second option, but it's that much more work for them. And if we're going to vote one way, I don't know if it adds a ton of value. I mean, maybe it does. I could kind of go either way with it.
I think that I think we could probably do one of the modulars, the one that probably makes sense. I mean, and we can discuss that, I'm sure. But I think just to show people that, you know, if we chose modulars, this is why we're recommending
Yeah.
stick build, if that's the way we
And
go.
also, I suppose that would also show the difference over the long term. Not, I'm guessing, without sitting down and doing the math, is probably somewhat negligible in the long run.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
So
and
I
then-
think if we are going to cost estimate one of the modulars, I do think we should get a broad estimate, if we can, on what it would cost to put securities and intercoms, just to make them truly comparable, because otherwise that's going to be an add-on that we haven't. And then once we get that, we could price out whichever modular plus the building addition on a taxpayer level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it was the security, and it was a couple other things, right?
It's the security cameras throughout the building, and it would be the intercom system. And then we talked about
you said the
reinforced
glass,
glass.
yeah.
But if you go with modular 1, both the preschool and the stick and mortar project plus the modular would need 3 millimeter at the preschool entrance.
Yeah.
So we could price that too, but that would have to be added to both.
And we're gonna add both of those so we can have that apples to apples comparison.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'll take those cameras, intercom, and the delayed entry glass, and I'll make sure these numbers have
Those
all
in
of
it.
those in it. So the stick built will go up a little bit, the others will go up more to
Yeah.
cover the additional cameras. So,
Yeah, I guess once the model that the finance individual builds, they just have to plug in the number. It's not going to
Yeah.
be a huge extra lift now that I think about it.
So once, I think for the next meeting, we could have new numbers that include those 3 things. And we could ask Todd if he could run like a scenario for the taxpayer so we can look at the impact. Before we talk about like which modular we think makes sense to move forward with, we had talked last meeting about whether there are any other viable options that this committee should be looking at or considering. We wanted to wait for you to come back because what we've talked about in the past is there any value to a third site? As a committee, we talked a little bit about that we can't just move the preschool because we're out of space at Freeman Kennedy too coming up. So the single solution fixes 2 things. So you can't just do an early childhood center, you'd have to move other students. And that doesn't really work well because our students need, if you move kindergarten, they need art, music, phys ed, all the special ed services. So we talked a little bit about a third site. We also talked about, Justin, the cost of a brand new site likely being above because we would have to do the construction site work.
yeah, depending on what that existing site is, there could be a lot of upfront costs just from an infrastructure perspective, whether it be roadways, whether it be utilities, power, etc. There could be a lot of upfront costs as well as land clearing, depending on what it is, again, whether it's for a building, for the associated parking, playgrounds. There's a a lot of possibilities depending on what the site actually is.
And then would that require added bus routes?
It would.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, if we did it as an early childhood and just moved to preschool, it would still need to have a kitchen because we have some kids that stay all day. But it would separate that building from so we have to provide preschool programming for students as of their 3rd birthday who have a disability or special education need. Most of those kids receive occupational therapy services, speech services, physical therapy services, academic services. So all of that is housed in another space. So you'd have to have people traveling. And we wouldn't have a solution for the Freeman. So you'd have to think about a building expansion or something else there to meet that need. So I don't know if there's any, and we talked a little bit about if there's any available buildings that could be retrofitted or renovated. If we were to move the preschool, every classroom space would need a bathroom, needs a kitchen, needs a common area playground. So we didn't really see viable options, but I don't know if you have anything that you think.
I think early on in the game, and I'm obviously coming back, so I'm kind of spitballing, so I don't know if you guys have talked about this. I haven't had an opportunity to talk to you too much about it.
Right.
But, initially, before we started this project, I was, I advocated seeing if we could lease space anywhere or anything like that. I guess for me, just a couple of quick questions, Ingrid. If we go to the building addition and renovation, how many classrooms are we adding with this potentially?
It is 7 preschool classrooms plus office space for related service providers. Special ed main offices would be housed there. And then, is it 7?
Six general classrooms for grades 3 through 6 with a science space and an art room and
Computer lab.
tech lab. Yep.
So it actually is 9 classrooms because we would be moving the art room, the current, well, we don't have current science room. We'd be moving spaces out of the building to free up
Yeah,
classrooms.
plus there's a handful of special education spaces that would be located over there to allow equal distribution as needed throughout the facility.
Definitely, just off of that, we're just more than 13 classrooms
Yeah,
when we think
it's
about
16.
preschool
Yeah.
and just general. The 3 to 6, you said 3 to 6.
Grades 3 through 6, so it's 6 classrooms for those grade
So yeah,
levels.
over 16 classrooms, I guess.
Yeah.
My question was going to be, what does the impact of, the change, with the change in the classrooms now with that grant, what does that do? It doesn't get to 16 classrooms.
No, it doesn't actually get it. It gets us 1 classroom. But
We have to talk about it. Because it's a
Absolutely.
question people are going to ask.
Yeah.
right? So,
what we are trying to do, and I don't know if the committee is aware, but because we have an anticipated group of new students coming as a result of the Bay State shelter, we have applied for grant funding from the state, and they have granted us $250,000 to repurpose a space at the Freeman Kennedy. They used to be, when the building first opened, a cable studio. It was wired for cable. There's a small office where all their equipment was in a small classroom. It's behind the gym. It's not really part of the school, so it can't be like a student classroom. And we are looking at moving our special ed offices out of HOD over there. And that gives us 3 offices where we could take 3 people sharing a classroom, put them in offices, and it gives us 1 classroom. So that we can have a classroom for our new students, a bridge classroom for them when they first arrive.
Yeah, so that's just really, focused on the short-term solution for the short-term need.
It's a short-term solution, but we're recommending that versus doing a construction trailer because once we build this office space, if we go with a brick and mortar, we're 4 years out. So if we didn't have the shelter, that would give us our music room back for a few years. So and eventually special ed offices will land at Freeman. So I think we get a little bit more mileage out of that move because it will free up 1 classroom, which could be music, or if we have to add a kindergarten next year, we won't lose the art room. So it gives us one extra space.
yeah, no, I don't know. I don't think there's any other perfect solutions. That there's not many town buildings just hanging out there for this size or anything like that. So
And
And
then,
we weren't
all the
aware of
leasing
any.
space that's it.
even on the lease side, I would assume that, is that typical, that a town would lease space to how's classrooms, and then also, what's the likely terms of the lease? Are we likely to get 10, 15, 20? I mean, for this, we're probably looking at least 20, 30 years out that we would
Right.
want terms.
Yeah, so I'm on the board of directors for the BICO Collaborative, which is a collaborative of 17 districts that provides specialized special education program to students with individual needs. We just went through a process of leasing space in a public school building for our programs, but the difference with BICO is that students are coming from multiple districts and they're not being served within their district. So we've rented space from one of our members who had an open building. It was quite expensive to retrofit the building to meet the needs of the students. We had to change HVAC and all kinds of things. And it's a per square footage lease. So I think you'd find 16 classrooms to be pretty pricey for that.
Plus all the logistical things that go with.
Well, the problem
Sending
again
kids.
is shared staff. And if you lease space, we also need, if kids are being educated somewhere else, it's not in town, so we need transportation, you'd need a kitchen, you'd need a cafeteria, you'd need a gymnasium, you'd need an art room, you'd need special ed space. So beyond the classrooms, you would need a bunch of other space. You need a whole school.
We need to lease a
from
school.
somewhere else.
But to be fair,
Yeah, but it's a good
you have to
question.
see,
Very good.
it's a logical
Absolutely.
avenue to explore.
Because,
It's a
for
logical-
example, in
yeah.
Brookline, we just leased a whole bunch of space, and that's where I
Yeah.
came from, right?
Yep.
We didn't have enough space, we couldn't build buildings, et cetera.
Yep.
There's a lot of different
Yeah.
issues that go along with it, and
Yep.
it's a different community, different density, et cetera. There's a lot more infrastructure there, so.
Yeah.
I think my intent was, as we looked at this committee, we had to look at every option. So everyone has to say, hey, we did look at those options, at least we discussed it, and why maybe leasing isn't feasible or so forth.
20-year lease, it gets the life expectancy of the
Right.
of the modular, or 15 years, 15 to 20, right?
Yep. I think Finish B was like 25 years you thought they would be.
Finish B is less.
I'm sorry, Finish A.
Finish B is 15, 20, Finish A is 20, 25. So half the expectancy of
And sorry if we talked about this, I can't recall, but in terms of maintenance costs, did we say that the maintenance costs for the modulars would be more?
It may be slightly more just because of the finishes.
Yeah.
Degrading over time, things move a little bit more, like,
Like you said, the operating costs would be more too, because like, for instance, like heating, cooling, it's like a less efficient building.
it is, we still have to meet the energy code, but it is a standalone building, there's more exterior envelope, it would be more expensive to heat. Additionally, like what we had mentioned, is any equipment that you would use to clean the building, you need duplicates, because you're not gonna wheel it across the sidewalk to go floors, so,
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, if it's only 2 or 3 million, are we going to erase that savings by the potential maintenance costs or requiring, duplicate?
right, over the life of the building, probably. I don't have the numbers or anything like that, but, I mean, you split that over X number of years, and it gets smaller and smaller, and, yeah.
So I think some information that we still wanted to bring back to the committee was just an impression or general thoughts from the police and fire around the modular solutions and what that would mean for them in terms of emergency planning, cost estimate about the impact on taxpayers of the different scenarios over time. I can certainly bring some information if the committee wants to see it from BICO in terms of what the typical lease costs have been annually for some of those spaces that we've rented. And then I think, do we want to talk about of the modulars?
Yeah.
What we would want to price?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if we're jumping the gun, but we've been kicking around modulars 1, 2, and 3, and I think there's some clear gaps that, maybe we need to face.
I don't know. I think it's pretty clear, well, at least for me, it seems if we're gonna, look at this, it seems like modular 1 seems like the one that makes the most sense, and probably building addition. Probably we're gotten to the point where we probably want to narrow down what we're looking at.
Would agree.
And I also think if we don't think option 2 or 3 are feasible, then you don't need to go to police and fire and see what that, is going to look like, because I think we know that it is going to increase the complexity of a safety event on campus. So the specifics may not matter if we're, weighing them.
So do we want to get the cost analysis? I think first, Justin, you were going to let us know what we would need to add to the building addition in modular 1, because we didn't think about the reinforced glass of the pre-K entry, which we would want to be similar to the rest of the building, and then what that would cost for the glass and security cameras and intercoms to add to the modular. Once we have those 2 new prices, we can then get the cost analysis from the town of what that would look like. I think just that is gonna, they're $3 million apart right now.
Yeah.
They're gonna close. Was there any interest in, so when we talked about level A and level B is more like a construction trailer? It's a little above that. You said it doesn't have a foundation.
Yeah, it's above that. It's on piers. The materials, it's more of your poured floors versus tile. The wall covering on the set of tile is like a vinyl. The HVAC systems are split units, so it's the units that are through the wall. Think of almost like a hotel-ish tile or style versus, say, larger units that you would typically have in a building. So it's same configuration, it's level of finishes and types of systems. They're not quite as either robust or durable or specific to.
This is a silly question maybe, but if I walk into A and B, can I tell the difference just aesthetically, or are we talking like underneath the floors, is it different?
Yeah, you would be able to tell the difference. If you walked into A, you would see tile on the walls to guard against abrasion and backpacks and bumping and damage, whereas if you walked into B, it would be a vinyl wall covering, almost like a super heavy-duty wallpaper.
Okay.
The floors in the bathroom in A would be tile. The floors in the bathroom would be B. In B would be a poured epoxy floor. From the outside, A would have fiber cement siding on it. B would have more of your almost like the textured plywood that you can see at Home Depot, Lowe's, or any of the box stores, stuff like that. So there is a visible component to it,
Yeah.
but then there's also stuff that you don't see. So for instance, the HVAC.
Right.
The units on B are through the wall, so they're a little bit louder in the classrooms, versus a single unit feeding multiple classrooms on the roof is more quieter. So there's those components as well.
So they do feel different. They're not just different quality.
Yeah, windows, it's vinyl versus aluminum. It's still the same amount of glass, but the frames are slightly different as well.
And there's a longevity difference of 10 years between the two, right?
Yep.
And they're $2 million apart. They're not dramatically different in price. So I want to just, are we pricing both levels of modular A, or are we looking at are we doing both level A and level B finish, or are we going with one?
I feel like we should just go with one.
Yeah.
Either way, though, once we do that, it's easy to figure out the difference between the two.
Yeah.
Because if we're going to do it the way I would do it is in terms of cost, and I'll let Todd do it, but I would just do, whatever the bond we think, we'll do a guesstimate of the interest rate based on what our financial advisor says, and then we would just calculate what the cost would be per $100,000 of value of the home. So you could easily plug in a number and figure out the other one too, technically. So.
I just don't know if are we interested in a level B finish without a foundation? I see more security issues with that than I do with the other modular.
Well, and
you've got
longevity.
vinyl walls
I mean,
it's a 15-year and
15 years and
vinyl
then we'll
window
have to
versus
build another.
aluminum. It just doesn't seem like it would be reasonable for the town to invest that in, so.
I agree.
So can we, because we almost did this last week, can we make a motion to remove 2 and 3 from consideration, and then also level B from consideration? Are we there this week?
Well, I think we didn't have the whole committee
No, we didn't.
last
Yeah.
time, so I think that was part of
And
why
now we finally do.
Now we finally,
I
thank you for
apologize.
scooting down here.
The only thing is we didn't post a vote on the agenda for tonight, so I think we can, if we are in agreement, then we will get pricing on the items that we agreed
And we can
on.
vote next
And
time.
next meeting, we can vote to eliminate these permanently and what our recommendation would be. But just for open meeting law, if we're going to vote on an action item, we're supposed to list it. So I think what we can do today is say, we're only interested in pursuing the security camera and the costs for modular one and the additional building addition, and getting pricing on the tax impact on those two. And then when we come back and look at that next time, we can vote to permanently eliminate some of these options and the levels of finish. I just wanted to know what we're pricing.
Yeah.
Does that work for everybody?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yes.
Ingrid, I had two thoughts. One, because I don't know if I was the culprit for the last meeting, but just in case there is any conflict with my schedule, I'm comfortable with that motion. I think we can focus on one, so if I'm not at the next meeting
Okay.
by any chance, I'm comfortable with that.
All right.
But two, just so I understand, the glass that you keep mentioning, is this the glass, like, when I'm coming to visit you, that front-facing area that we're talking about
Yes,
there?
by the main entrances of the buildings, we have reinforced, at each holiday, we have a heavier glass at all of the front windows. In Freeman, we have heavier glass, and then we have reinforced 3mm film on all the front-facing
So, yeah, it's
entrances,
like
and
where
where we have a
everything-
glass wall in the cafeteria.
Okay.
So this is not significant amounts, it's just we didn't
it's just
put
a
that
front.
reinforced 3mm film or heavier glass on the pre-K entrance, which is just two front entrance doors,
Okay, thank you.
which we would probably want to do.
So, what is the difference in the town voting schedule if we decide to offer an option to vote versus if we don't offer an option to vote? Does that get us any kind of significant start on the stick built? Because it's been out there for, so what I'm saying is, do
Yeah.
we have to wait, so if we vote on it in, what is it, November is the next town?
Next town meeting.
Next
meeting
meeting is going to be
Vote
November 12th.
Okay, so if we offer a choice, we've got to vote in November, right? Am I following?
So process-wise, what we would have to do at the next town meeting is make a recommendation, and we would be asking the town to appropriate funding
Right.
for the full design work, not for the full project.
Oh, right.
So there's
right.
engineering and design, like we have, you can explain better the difference between what we have. We have the feasibility study, we
Okay.
don't have full
Yeah, that's
floor
right, I remember
plans.
this. Yeah.
So what we would be best served by, I think, is be ready to make a recommendation of one design that the building committee thinks is in the best interest and recommend borrowing to do the design portion. It has to pass at town meeting, but it also has to pass at a ballot election, which we would
Yeah.
have to have in like December or January. So if you did two options, I don't know what that would look like. Generally, you make a motion for funding for,
I mean, I guess we defer to the committee, but I think we would just frame it, like you said, the design, and not really keep it as an option. I think.
he was suggesting, like, should we say, we recommend either modular A and building addition and vote on that with the public? I think when we get the pricing.
What I'm trying to get at is there any time wasted by going through these motions where we know we're going to end up with a stick built? Like, that just makes, because we talked about that last week, like, if none of these options make sense, then we make that call, and none of these options make sense, and then we go with the stick built, and we justify our reasons for why we think that,
Yeah.
which I think we can.
Yeah.
So does that gain us any time to start the stick built? Like, is it?
It
can-
doesn't, because it still has to go to town
Is it-
meeting, and then it has to go to the ballot, so we can't do anything until it goes through
Right.
those processes. And so, town meeting would be next. We have the advantage that on the stick building, we've done the full feasibility, we've done the traffic studies, we've done all the components, so you would be ready to just move forward. We have not done a full feasibility on a modular, which would slow us down.
And that's what I mean, do we have to do the feasibility on the modular if we decide that we don't have an adequate
No.
alternative? And is there any time savings there where we can remove 6 months of administrative feasibility studies and votes and get started on Freeman, basically?
If this committee votes that
Right.
this is the most viable option, we could go directly to town meeting with this recommendation in November. So yes, we wouldn't be doing a full feasibility study on the modular if this committee feels that the best recommendation is this, and that would gain us time from doing a full feasibility, so yes.
Correct.
Yeah,
So just-
I think once we see the difference to the taxes and the cost analysis, I think it, you know.
It will help.
Yeah, it will be helpful.
And once we adjust for the security cameras and
Yeah.
the other things.
Yep.
So does it make sense? How much time, Justin, would you need to price those things out?
Today's what? Tuesday?
Monday.
Tuesday.
I don't even know.
Thought it was Tuesday.
I can get them, I should be able to get them pretty quick.
Okay.
I'm out the end of this week. I'll try before I leave. If not, it'll be early next week.
Okay, so if we got that early next week, and then it goes to you, Justin, to have Todd run some scenarios, how much time do you need? I'm just trying to figure out when we would schedule it next.
I don't think it'd take Todd longer than a week. Yeah.
So if we look at meeting, like, we have time, because town meeting is in November, so we don't need to rush the process. But if we did, could we, I'm out the week of the 12th, could we look to meet the week of the 19th? To get all that information, and then we should be able to ready to form a recommendation. And what I'd love to do is, if we can finalize that recommendation in August, it would give us a chance to have a community forum in September and answer questions and, get some information out to the public before November, which I think is.
Well, and I think September feels right, especially because if there is significant concern, it gives us time to respond, address, maybe have another forum if we feel that that's necessary, because rather than just slamming one right before the
Yeah,
town meeting.
no, absolutely.
I like that, but also the warrant closes the 5th of September, so I like
Yeah.
August 19th. Obviously, we have flexibility there, but I think if we know what we want to do, it makes it pretty easy, just have the language ready to go.
Yeah, so maybe at the 19th meeting, we could look at this, make the final recommendation, and then we would be able to draft the language for the committee to approve before the 5th. That work? So what day works the week of the 19th for people?
Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
The board's meeting the 20th, so ideally,
So let's do the 19th, because our board meets the 20th too, so
Perfect.
August 19th?
I'll be away for that, but I'll support the vote for whatever you guys decide there. Or I'll just give my 2 cents before.
Yeah, I'll send the packet out, so if you have any
Yeah.
questions or concerns, you can. Okay, so August 19th, the library, Matt, will be clean and open by then?
I hope so, yeah.
Otherwise, we'll send you an updated location, but August 19th at 7, and we will have the tax analysis, the cost estimate, and I will have some additional information on lease space.
thank
Sound
you.
good?
Yep.
Could we, so I understand what Todd's going to do. I'm assuming he's looking at like both level A finish for a modular and then the stick-built to say, based upon the estimated cost, this is what the tax burden impact would be. Could we just have him concurrent with that say, also, this is what the design cost, because it's a percentage of the estimated cost.
Oh,
of the
yeah,
design.
yeah.
So that when we
Yeah.
go to town meeting, we can say, overall, the project we're proposing is going to be X. Right now, in the short term, for this borrowing article, it's going to be, a much smaller
Yeah, instead of a cup of
X.
coffee,
So like,
it's-
this is the short-term tax implication for the borrowing article, and long-term, this is what, just so I feel
Yeah.
like that is a question that might.
Yeah.
I think if you
What
have that figure,
percentage
you
is that
can.
usually?
Yeah, you can, I mean, I know you can
Yeah,
just
I can
back it
break
out,
that
but
down.
I trust Todd's math, so.
Yeah, so the fees are different because once it passes at town meeting in the ballot, it is large enough, it is a public project, unless if you guys want to be your own owner's project manager.
Oh, thank you.
Exactly. So they would also be coming on board. There would be fees associated with them as well. What we can do is we can estimate
The
based
percentage.
on, yep, exactly, typical rates, anywhere from 3 to 4, upwards of 5, depending on where it lands. And our fees are typically 10%-ish, but there's additional extra services and the rest. So we can get that information over to you, Ingrid. That way you have those 2 tax impacts. Your initial year 1, we'll call it, and then ultimately, once everything goes through,
Right.
for the construction component.
Great.
All right. Anything else? Anyone? All right, then I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody.